We're live.
All right.
All right. How
Morning.
exciting. So we are live. We can give some people a couple minutes to see this notification, hopefully, and join us. Obviously, our first LinkedIn Live here. We'll give it maybe
Huge
1 minute.
milestone.
How exciting.
All right.
We've done a lot of webinars in the past, but no more Zoom for now. We're going full straight to the source.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
That's it. Well, with things moving this fast, we've got to get the information out to people even faster, right? So no more waiting weeks for these presentations. Let's bring the real deal people like MQ to the masses as soon as we can.
That's right. Awesome. Well, given it about a minute, so I'll go ahead and make some intros and we can get started. Obviously, want to thank everybody for joining us on LinkedIn today. Obviously, our new platform of choice. So, new platform, new way to bring our subject matter experts into your purview. So as many of you know that follow FortyOak, we are leaders in the intelligent automation space from a staffing and advisory perspective. I'm Jessica Zich, joined by Anthony Giardina and MQ Qureshi. I lead our strategic partnerships here at FortyOak. Anthony Giardina is obviously our head of strategy and services and your resident webinar host extraordinaire. And then we have MQ. MQ has worked with many very impressive companies, McDonald's, Puma, Grainger, in various capacities, and is a digital transformation evangelist, enthusiast, strategist. And he's coming to us live here today to chat with us about digital transformation. How are we making that happen within organizations? And if you hang on for a little while, you may learn something about dirt as a service. And that's just a teaser into the conversation. Hopefully that piques your interest and you stick with us throughout the rest of this. But I'm going to drop here and let Anthony and MQ get to it. And we're looking forward to, if you have any comments, you can absolutely post them in the chat and we'll get to them shortly. So I will let our two resident experts get to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. Really appreciate that. Really looking forward to this conversation today with MQ. I spend all of my days, interacting with different clients who have different perspective of what a digital transformation is. Some of them think about it as, implementation of RPA software. Some of them think about it as rollout of mobile applications. There's different meanings for everybody. And MQ, I think, has seen many of the different flavors and different applications of digital transformation. And in our conversations leading up to the event here, I thought you had a really interesting perspective of how to maybe take the technology and push it a little bit towards the back and really start talking about experience, right? And the experience as a service that can now be brought in and really put a different spin on what a digital transformation may mean when people are thinking about how to get that done inside their organization. So maybe MQ, maybe you could start us there and just take us through, that concept that you have and what experience as a service really means.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Anthony, thank you so much. I appreciate the invite, and it's really exciting to be on the debut LinkedIn Live broadcast for FortyOak. So again, it's a privilege, and thank you. Greetings to whoever may be joining us, and especially from, if anybody's in the Chicago area, that's where I am. Would love to connect if you feel like you want to take the conversation off. But so experience as a service is really something that I believe is the that next level that we want to start thinking about to really hone and give shape to a transformation. So if you look at trends over the last several years, whether it be retail or B2B, there's that idea of there was the idea of brick and mortar. There was the idea of click only, then click and mortar, came around. And, I think that's where a lot of, us either are, or, we're even trying to get there. And, what's actually pretty amazing is that this last year and a half or so that we've had in the pandemic has really forced this transformation efforts forward, because we've had to adapt and we've had to move really quickly. And what? But when you start to look at that construct, um, what it all comes down to is engagement with your customer, and really understanding what the business outcomes of your customer are. And anyone that starts to think in that space, needs to, and think is thinking about transformation, needs to put those business outcomes right front and center. And what is emerging, and what has really been honed in this last year and a half, is that it's not digital only, it's not physical only, it is a combination of physical and digital that is going to propel us forward. Because what we've seen is that while we can do everything virtually, or most everything virtually, we're still human beings. We still crave physical contact, physical experience, physical communication. And where the opportunity for brands exists are where they can engage with their customer via experiences, to build their brand loyalty and to really bring their brand values forward. So when you think about that, that's really where experience as a service comes from. Now, how many folks, how many companies, how many organizations are actually equipped to do that? Do they have the infrastructure? Do they have the tenets in their brand to be able to bring that to life? Not many do. So, generally there are a couple of things that are available, to them. They can go and participate in an expo, and if you know that's 70% plus of people who attend a brand expo event and engage with that brand in some sort of experience tend to increase their loyalty much more so than if they bought it off the shelf.
Right.
So you have that particular option. However, that being said, not everybody wants to participate or thinks that participating in an expo is the right space for them. So what else is left? You can start thinking about pop-up stores, right? Huge trend, at least pre-pandemic, you'd see pop-up stores, jumping up all the time, which is fantastic. However, pop-up stores are expensive. I think it's about $1 million, a pop, for a well-sized brand to put up a pop-up store for any significant amount of time, especially in a place that's going to be high traffic. Again, who has the resources and the infrastructure to do that? And the third area is, if you look at your brand itself, how does it actually, relay experience? So, let's take some examples of which brands live experience. Starbucks is an example, right? When Starbucks came forward, they it wasn't about buying coffee. You could buy coffee anywhere. You could buy coffee in coffee shops. What Starbucks did was that it created a space that you wanted to stay in. That whole footprint of the store was designed so that you could sit there and look cool and trendy. And that was a big part of paying the extra premium that you did for the coffee that you were getting. That set the model for all coffee shops, altogether. Whole Foods is another good example of that, where, the idea of being in there and experiencing things. Costco does this better than really almost anybody else in terms of being able to have you try out different brands when you're in the store. Red Bull, where the Red Bull is an energy drink, but Red Bull Extreme Sports, etc., everything that they've jumped into really lives and embodies that experience. But not everybody has access to that. So this is where experience as a service comes in, where we start thinking about how do we take the tenets of our brand and start to move that forward.
Yeah.
Now,
and I would think, MQ, just to hop in there for a sec. So I think that's a really important point. So I just want to kind of like hone in on that for a second. There's lessons that we can take away from some of the most popular brands and probably bring them back to our corporate environment, right? And set priority for ourselves, right? What is the most important outcome, right? The most important outcome is the experience that your employees that your customers are going to have with a given process, right, or an event. We're typically going through a digital transformation, not just to put a lot of technology out there, but to make sure that that process or product is improved upon in a way that we weren't able to before. And I think it's just really poignant that those brands have found ways to do that, to sell coffee or sell groceries, right, or sell drinks. But that's not necessarily the experience that drew people in to accomplish that goal.
Right. And a lot of people might be listening and going, well, that's great for Starbucks and Red Bull and Whole Foods, but I'm not Starbucks, Red Bull, and Whole Foods.
Right.
I make, farm equipment. So how does that? How do I deal in this? Well, there's a very poignant, very relevant example of that, which I actually had the pleasure of hearing the amazing Terry Jones, who is the founder of Travelocity and co-founding chairman of Kayak, speaks about this a lot. And I got to meet him last week as I was at a conference in Las Vegas. And he brought up some really good examples, one of which was around farming in particular. And so did you know, and then Jessica mentioned this, at the beginning, that you can have dirt as a service. So when I heard that, I was like, what? Dirt as a service? Right. So when you think about, we talk about software as a service. I'm talking about experience as a service, dirt as a service. Where does that come from? Well, people at Caterpillar, John Deere, et cetera, realized that they were making equipment for farmers. But really what is going to propel it forward is if farmers actually do better. If their business outcomes of their customer, they can yield better crops, they can yield, more from their land. That's going to drive the sales of their own equipment. So they started investing in an entire digital and physical ecosystem to be able to bring that forward. And so, you now have situations where, when you think about drones, right, and drones being used to irrigate crops much more efficiently, well, it was discovered, by some of these manufacturers that, if you actually add radar and LiDAR and some of these things to the drones, you can actually tell the physical footprint of that farmer's land and see which areas need to be irrigated, which areas need to be, dusted better with fertilizer, and what's that actual, footprint look like. Before, a farmer had to take their own experience of years and bring that to the foray and say, I'm going to go do this, and therefore I need to estimate how much dirt I might need to be able to carry this project forward. Well, in this particular case, now you've got, digitally enabled physical equipment that's telling you that, and you can, and now you, through that ecosystem that they've built out of services to provide to farmers can now sign up for getting dirt delivered to them on demand or as a service as needed. So what we need to do is think about disruption, right? How do we think about our business outcome of our target customers, and then think about how to get that forward? And then that is the place where our services should come in and where our innovation should lead and where which should drive the direction of our transformation.
Right. I had a thought as you were explaining that, and I think it seems kind of obvious when you think about it, right? So when you first hear dirt as a service, you say to yourself, well, what is that, right, to your point? But then, okay, so we could use a series of technologies to better measure moisture and conditions, and we can use different tools to do that, like the drones and different algorithms and whatnot. And then we can compile that information to make informed decisions, which I think is a logical train of thought for a lot of people, but it's in direct contrast to the traditional decision-making method, right, which was experience and hierarchy. Right. And when I think about that in a corporate setting, if you think about how do we enable something like that, you've got your traditional IT department who probably wants to build the biggest, best, fastest drone, right, and the biggest, best, AI algorithm to figure out on the moisture or whatever it might be. You've got operations people or logistics people, and they're all worried about their towers in this very hierarchical fashion.
Right.
So for those of us that are, in the corporate world here, what are your thoughts on changing the way that those decisions get made and how our organizations are structured in order to yield in this, potential dirt as a service, world.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It sounds really logical when you put it that way, right? But that's through the benefit of hindsight, right? When you're at the beginning of the journey where that outcome isn't quite clear, and you're the one going and pitching it, you end up bouncing against all these structures, right? And that's because there's a couple of reasons for this, but I would say the most direct is that our organizations, by and large, especially for brands that have been around for a long time, or companies that have been around for a long time, is that we are structured in an industrial age, right? Our corporate structures are really focused around, building everything around that industrial age of sourcing, manufacturing, and selling to, a customer. Uh, we need to completely change that structure altogether, and stop creating our departments around what that construct is, because what it does is it creates a lot of silos, and it creates departmental outcomes that people are being judged against from the individual level, right? What's your individual KPI? What did you achieve? What's your departmental KPI? What did you achieve? And that's really what everybody gets focused on, because that's how they're rewarded. But if you take that out and you remove the silos, then you can start to look at what the business outcome is for, and what the experience outcome is for your customer, and then you restructure around that. Now, I might say that, and someone will say, "Well, yeah, that's great. That's a pipe dream. We're not going to get there." Well, the thing is that we don't have a choice. You don't have a choice, because what happens is that while you're sitting around figuring out, oh, here's all the reasons why this can't be done, right? A startup in a garage with, two guys, and their beat up car.
Yeah, no limitations.
Are going to disrupt you. The longer you've been around, the more open you are for disruption. And and that's an extreme example, right? But you see this with, like, for example, JLL, global conglomerate, in the commercial real estate space, right? Kretzy came along and completely, disrupted a portion of that business, because they were able to deliver a great user experience and lots of great analytics and reports, right? It took one sliver and they did it really well. So you saw that with Optum and GoodRx, right? And you're continuing to see it in more and more disruption that's happening. So if you are a leader at an organization, you have to start this conversation at the top, at this C-suite level, and start saying, how do we empower our people? And there's ways to get there, but you need to be able to be bold.
Right, and start with the outcome in mind, right? Not just with each one of the functions, which, I think I would have to assume probably 99% of the corporations in America are probably structured to make sure that those functions are accounted for, and they hope that the outcome is right? Because if all the pieces are there, then the outcome should be there. But if we start with that outcome in mind, I think going back to your experience as a service, it just orientates the mindset, right? To get to the right place, rather than, in our example before, build the best drone, build the best algorithm. That doesn't really matter if the outcome isn't right.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, those are departmental level goals, because now you're saying, okay, like, let's take transformation in general, right? How is transformation generally approached? Well, a lot of people go, well, that doesn't really affect me. That's the technology team, right?
Right.
But transformation is more than just new technology, right? It's about it's about process. It's about change management. It's about empowering individuals, right? And so when you think about transformation, yeah, you could start to change out your customer-facing ecosystem, your internal-facing ecosystem, your communication system, etc. And that's a way to approach it. However, there's no direction of what outcome you're going to achieve, right? When I talked about that example of dirt as a service, it's because they united, that company and those group of people united around making farmers more productive. It's a very simple, very straightforward goal, but it set the direction for everybody.
Right.
So you need to set that clear, simple direction that everybody can get behind, and that helps drive things forward. Now, when you start to get down that path, you're going to encounter the resistance. This is where the people aspect of it come in. And so change management and people management is just as important as the technology changes that you're going to be bringing into place, because all that change has impact. It has impact to your current workforce, your future workforce. And so you need to be able to get them from here to here, and bring everybody along in that journey for you.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Once you've been through a digital transformation or two, you realize that yes, technology has a role, right? I mean, that is the digital piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it really comes down to a lot of change management, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of acceptance of change,
Mm-hmm.
and really leadership to bring you through those those key decision-making moments, those difficult situations, to get people on board to get to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
I know the majority of conversations that we wind up having with FortyOak are with customers. They're just trying to figure out, who can I get to lead this program? Like we have an idea where we want to go. We have an idea of what the outcome should be, but who can actually step in and shoulder that load, right? Because it is a much wider set of responsibilities than we're traditionally giving to people. Where I think a lot of our professions have become very in-depth, and valued on the depth of knowledge. Now we're valuing breadth of knowledge,
Right.
and we're saying, how do we find that person who's willing to accept all those different components,
Right.
and being challenged by it.
Mm-hmm.
So in your opinion, and through your experiences at McDonald's and Grainger and Puma, like, how do you start, right? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this right now, and they're not in their head. They're saying, okay, this all makes sense. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But where do I really how do I get started on it?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think that the heart of this, at least as I've seen and what I've experienced, is it comes down to what are the enterprise level journeys of your customer. And this doesn't necessarily need to be only for direct to consumer or B2C brands. This is very applicable to B2B service companies as well. You need to understand who are the key drivers of your outcomes. So Grainger is a great example. When I first joined, I was coming off of Razorfish, and Puma, you mentioned, was a great customer that I built a global digital roadmap for. And so coming off of that, I had all these bag of tricks, right? Here's, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, etc. And one of them was, at the time, customer personas were quite a new thing. We've evolved a lot, beyond that. A lot of people still use personas, but I think we've morphed into looking at behavioral archetypes as opposed to personas. But at least back at that time, it was pretty new. And when I came in, I found a company, a B2B company that was in the manufacturing, and distribution space, actually being very far ahead of its time in terms of that, because company wide there were two personas that really helped drive things forward. Right, there was the end user of the product that was ordered through Grainger's 1 to 2 million SKUs, and then there was the procurement manager who made the decision of what to order. And by focusing on those two folks, they realize that they can, really get a lot of people aligned to what, needed to be done. So one is understanding, who are the people, whether it's front of the house, back of the house, that are going to drive the usage and the decisioning, of your, when it comes to how you interact with them. The second part is looking at the journey, right? So how does, anything that you're doing, how do customers, you need to map what today is. So how do they engage with you today? What are the footprints through which they do it? What are the channels, digital, physical, both, right? And then how does it go from awareness to curiosity to transaction? What happens during that transaction? What happens afterwards? And how do you build a relationship? As you identify those steps, now this is not something new. Customer journeys have been around for a long time as well, but they're used most of the time as a tool of a UX team, a design team to think through design solutions.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that a company at the C-suite level needs to adopt it as a way of understanding what the total map of their organization is, and making sure that and then make sure that everybody understands what those steps are. Because what happens is that you start to map that down. First, you start with the steps. That's usually where the design exercise ends.
Mm-hmm.
But now, when you layer on top of that data, so what are the key KPIs and business drivers that align across all of those steps? Let's layer on the technology layer. What are all the systems and the departments? Sorry, what are all the systems and the technologies that support each of those steps? Let's layer on communications, marketing perspective. How are we marketing to customers in each of these steps? Now let's layer on people. What are the departments? That gives you a very good picture of where all your friction points lie. And you can first start by removing the friction. The second thing then you can do is you can look at where are your opportunities for disruption. Because when you map that out, every time I've done it with any kind of customer over the last 10 years, 15 years, is that immediately those things have jumped out. And it's amazing how many senior leaders don't know it. And it's nothing wrong, or it's nothing to be ashamed about, from that perspective. We're just not structured that way. Once that's laid out, now you have a good picture of what today is. You can start to prioritize your roadmaps. You can start to think about what are the things that you want to move with first. But then when you think about, again, those end customers, and you layer on top of them the business outcomes that will help them, that then adds further focus and priority. Now what you can do is, when you have that and you start thinking about organizational structures, what happens with organizational structures is that a lot of times product management, marketing, et cetera, are all siloed, right? And what you can do is take those silos out and organize your teams according to the journey. I want someone focused on what happens after an order takes place, and you have to look at that from soup to nuts.
Right.
Once you do that, then you can remove the barriers between those silos, and you can bring those support organizations in total service of removing the friction and improving the journey. And startups who are doing this from day one are able to go in and disrupt very quickly, because they're not stymied by those old structures.
Yeah.
Now, somebody might be sitting here and tell me what you think about this and go, well, that's all well and good, MQ, but you know what? My organization is huge. We've got offices in multiple countries, thousands of people in our workforce. We can't do that. That's going to take years to put into place. Is that a fair question, you think?
I would think a lot of people are probably scratching their head and trying to figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? Again, it's not going to happen by itself. It's not going to happen in a vacuum. It's going to require leadership and boldness, right? So you are going to need to make some bold moves. Does it need to be across the whole enterprise? No. What you need to think about is, once you map that, first invest in the mapping, of that, right? I've led a lot of workshops around this way. Anybody who's interested, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it offline. But map that journey out, and then start saying, okay, what is indicative at a small scale that can then extrapolate out? Right. This is exactly what startups do. When they come in, they have to talk about how what they do, what their disruption is going to scale. You need at a corporation, you need to do the exact same thing. What is the smallest, the most simplest form of an idea, and how does it scale out? And how can you test that quickly and validate it with customers? Put a pricing plan around it. Extrapolate out the indicative KPIs. And then what you can do, and then put it into play. Fail quickly, learn from that. But the whole idea being is that, again, that true north of that business outcome needs to be first. And you can then take that, build on that success, and then slowly roll it out into other, parts of your business. It is going to take some time, but it'll put you on a path. You need to start thinking about it now, so that 3 years from now, you can leapfrog your competition. But if you're focused on only quarterly goals, if you're thinking that transformation is going to happen in 3 to 6 months, and if you don't see those results, you're going to get, frustrated and walk away, then, really this approach is not for you. But if you're willing to be bold, you really can move things forward in a very, very tremendous way.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I know my experience has been that that boldness doesn't just apply to the pilot that you're running, the technologies that you bring in, the number of resources that you throw at the project or the pilot,
Mm-hmm.
but it also comes in to how bold do you want to be in your change management efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the bigger the organization, the more people you have to get on board, right? So that's natural, and there's no way to change that. And if you're willing to be bold in your communications and your change management efforts with that larger organization, then you have a chance to move faster.
Mm-hmm.
But I know, like, I've been in part of programs who decided to invest in technology, invested in the people to run the technology, invested in the mapping exercise,
Mm-hmm.
but were a little hesitant to invest in that change management and really wanted to kind of slow play that. And that just dictated the pace of the transformation completely.
Right, right. Yeah, because transformation is hard. It makes people uncomfortable because there's new things that are happening. And especially as part of that, the way of measurement needs to be looked at as well. So that there's a fear of failure, there's a fear of being called out, right? That's inherent to that, right?
Yeah.
And the difficulty is that you as an individual, an individual might think, oh shoot, things are happening and changing, that's outside of my comfort zone, I'm going to get left behind, therefore I'm going to resist it. Now you could look at that at the individual level and say, well, that's just that individual's issue, but the truth is that that's much further spread than you think. This is where the I think the this is where the responsibility of leadership comes in. So you have to think of that vision, but you also have to think about how does it get executed?
Yep.
Because just putting something out there and saying, okay, now I'm going to sit back and let it happen is not the right way. You have to think through all the layers of how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it's your responsibility as a leader to make sure that every layer, every individual in those teams understands their role in making that forward. Again, I'm going to help farmers have better yield of crops, right?
Yeah.
That is a great unifying message, right? But now when you start to get into the granularity, you have to bridge that gap and say, here's the vision, here's how you help us get there. And so when you do that, now you're empowering people for real and saying it's okay to come up with something wrong.
Right.
But so and that really is going to make the difference between a successful or an unsuccessful transformation effort.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could probably talk for another hour on the difference in leadership styles that's required to do this, right? It kind of comes back to what we were talking about before around hierarchical and experience-based leadership versus really data-driven, fact-based decision making, and really understanding and consideration for all the people around you in order to, move in the direction of the outcome that you're seeking, right?
Right.
But let's do that. Let's come back and do that again another day.
Yeah.
I thought this was a great conversation. I hope a lot of people have gotten exposure to your experience as a concept, experience as a service concept. I think it's invaluable. Putting outcomes first. I really want to thank you, MQ, for taking the time and sharing your thoughts with us. I'm sure it's been great value to many of the people out there, and we'll look forward to talking to you again.
Anthony, an absolute pleasure, and again, very excited to have been on the debut LinkedIn Live for FortyOak. We'll look forward tremendously to lots more productive conversations. And anybody who sees this, please feel free to reach out anytime. As Anthony knows, I could talk about this all day.
Sounds good, MQ. Thanks so much.
Take care.
All right, take care. Bye.